This is your feedback time. What are your thoughts on the last portion? What are you thinking? What was that? So cool. What was cool? To be loved. Awesome. That's the main point. Yeah. Isn't that a great little point? I mean, it's not in the text, but culturally it's in the text. Yeah. Yeah. I love this story, and I've studied it for years. And it was probably 20 years ago that I really started getting into more of the intricacies of the chapter. I mean, I just, to be honest with you, to get it in by 11 o'clock, I just skipped a bunch of stuff. Because this chapter is filled with the revelation of God the Father. It's just packed just about in every little verse down here. And the whole aspect of the older son, and that's a whole other one in itself. It's just that last third of the chapter. But I heard when I was in Kansas City, a Jewish believer was going to be teaching on Luke 15, and I went. And though he had a very, very different viewpoint on a number of the aspects, that was one of his teachings of a whole weekend, and I went to that one teaching. He said that's when he brought the whole thing about the culture in. So then I took that because, to be honest with you, I don't like to just hear something and say, that's the gospel truth. So I just went back and studied it out, and sure enough, it was true. That children ran, women ran, and servants and slaves ran, men didn't run unless they were going to battle, and at which point they would gird their loins, and because it was a shame to uncover your knee. So, yeah, it's just. But if you guys want to get some things where Jewish scholars talk about things in the Old Testament, or get some Jewish scholars who are now believers and do some cultural things. Almost every story, well, pretty much every story in little parable in Scripture, when you understand the culture connected to the parable, it opens it up even more so. So if you're one that likes to, and it's not like, well, I'm not a big studier and I don't want to spend hours. It's not hours of work. It really is. It's especially with the internet nowadays, all the things I spent money on of books, I just go beep, and up comes this little Hebrew culture of the Davidic period. How would you like that one? Hebrew culture of the time of Ezra. Hebrew culture of, Abraham and the beginnings of culture. And so just it's all there. Any other thought or question on the last portion before we get going? Okay. I know that this was the first session after an exhausting weekend, and so thank you for being there. Thank you for those that did go to sleep. It was only for a short period of time, and I appreciated that. None of you snored, and though I did see you asleep, I just thank you for coming back to this world. And no, seriously, I mean, I just have been I did the same thing in when I was in Kansas City. We had conferences constantly, and then I'd have to be teaching class, and I'd be up there. You ever drive a car and you go, whoa, how did I get these last 3 miles, 5 miles, 10 miles? I do not remember driving the last 10 minutes. Isn't that a weird thing? And I've been teaching and talking, and usually you have to have your intellect connected to your speech, and I've been talking, suddenly go, how did I get here? What did I just say? And I'll say, now, does that make sense? And everyone goes, yeah. I go, wow. God truly is here. So I totally understand. Just pinch each other to stay awake if you can. Not because I really care if you're sleeping or not. I just don't want you snoring for the sake of the camera. Oh, yeah, I'm on film. Really? Yeah, that was me. I want to tell you a little story. It's more than a little story. It's a bigger story because it's my story, and because it's mine doesn't make it big. Because God's in the middle of it, it makes it big. Someone asked me recently. They asked me really recently. I was in Japan, and this the sweetest little Japanese gal came up, and she just said to me in this really high voice, said, when did you start to understand the Father? And I thought about it, and I thought about the word Father, and I went back in my own life, and I went, wow. I kind of learned, like probably many of you learn something the hard way. When you I had an older brother and an older sister, so I got in much less trouble than they did. Because I would watch them, and they would do stupid things and get into trouble. And I would go, I won't do that, I won't say that, I won't go there, I won't do that. And so I learned by watching other people mess up. Now, when you don't have somebody that's just older and you learn because you're messing up, and I've learned that way too. And so when she asked me the question, when did you learn about the Father? I thought, gosh, when have I not known about the Father? What I needed, though, was to be rebooted about the Father, because my initial understanding set the pace in the wrong way. If you move a missile just a little bit, just an inch down on the site will make a mile down there. The same thing is true in your life. If you move from truth to falsehood a little bit, every part of your life is affected by the falsehood of what you believe about God back here. That's why I just keep going back to, you have to know what he's like. You have to know how he sees you. Not just what he's like. Oh, he's a great guy. Ralph's a great guy. I love Ralph. But if I tell to someone that they don't see Ralph, they don't experience, they don't get a Ralph hug. I love getting a Ralph hug because I'm a big guy. But when Ralph hugs me, I'm just this little tiny thing. He could crush me if he wanted to. Come on now, you could crush me if you wanted to. He's just this big bear hug. Oh, come here. Oh. It's kind of like, I just go, yeah, I'm a baby again. And I just, I recently was with a guy who's about 6'8" and about 300 pounds. And I just remember, I just saw an aspect of tenderness. I saw him hug somebody. I just went up to him and said, excuse me. He goes, yeah. He goes, I want you to hug me. He goes, sure. He gives me this big bear hug. And what I wanted him to do was to lift me off the ground and put me on his lap and then really hug me. But I didn't, we didn't know each other. I just, literally, I just met the guy. But he was big, and why? Because we all want to be surrounded by love. We want that, don't you? Isn't that what you want? I have 3 daughters, and it's like, the man I'll marry someday. And I have a picture of my girls when they were really young, and my middle daughter decided to play the bride, so she dressed up her other older and younger sister, and she was the bride, and she has this little bouquet here. And because even at this young age, she wanted to be beautiful, she wanted to be seen as beautiful, and she wanted to be held as beautiful. And that's your desire, is that, even guys, you want to be known as beautiful, as a beautiful person. You want someone to see your worth, and you want someone to acknowledge it and then come to you and hold you and accept you and just take all of you in their heart. When you don't have that on here, then you have a life of missing the mark out here. I just don't seem to have meaningful relationships. Why? Take the missile back to the launching pad. Something's off here. When it's off here, we keep missing. I want to get married someday, and I've gone out with a bunch of guys, but nothing lasts over 6 weeks. What happens at 6 weeks? The same thing, it just dismantled. Why? What happens? Well, it's not his fault. Usually, okay, well, get it. What's going on? And you find out, well, I don't want history to repeat itself. I know my parents were, and okay, well, let's go back to the long, let's get healed up over here of how you see Dad, and then how Dad makes you see God, and what that does for your future of other men. And it changes everything. It really does. And so my own dad was it was an older sister and then 4 brothers right in a row. And literally 1 year after another. And there was a much older sister, and then the four guys just came boom, 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 boom. And the saying that they had together was that when one of us has $1, we each have a quarter. And when he graduated from high school, they got part-time jobs and put him through college. And then the other three got part-time jobs and put him through college, and then put him through college, and then put him through college. That's pretty cool. I don't know anyone that does that nowadays. But their old saying was and they would when they would be away and they had their own homes. I remember watching my dad come up and seeing my Uncle Tom, and he would come up to shake his hand, and he'd go, when one of us has $1, the other one would say, we each have a quarter. And that's how they lived their lives. All their lives. When one of them was having trouble, the other three poured money into that home. When my dad had trouble, they poured money in to help my dad. And it's just an amazing thing. And he was born 1924, and his nickname was Nice Guy Dave, because he would run ahead of you to open the door. He was Nice Guy Dave. And he was, at I don't know, whatever age it was, World War II broke out. America entered the war in December of 41, so really didn't enter the war till really the beginning of 42. He had been in college, or he was going to go to college, went for a little bit, quit, and then joined the Air Force, which I don't understand because my dad had a fear of heights. So he has a fear of heights and he joins the Air Force. It didn't, got a plane up there. When you have a fear of heights, you don't normally say, I think I'll join the thing that will put me up in the air. And what happened was a recruiter, lovely recruiter, said, oh, you're smart enough, you've got some college, you can be an officer immediately. You'll be an officer, you'll come in as a lieutenant, and we'll probably put you training people out in Colorado. He said, sounds great. So they hired him, or they brought him in, made him an officer, and then sent him to England to fly B-17s, which was not Colorado. And his job was to go from England over the English Channel into it was France, but they call occupied France, meaning the Germans were occupying France, and next to France is Germany. And his role was to fly B-17s. He was the bombardier, and then he was the radar guy. So they would fly in formation, which looked like bowling pins set up with one guy in front, then two, then three, then four, then five, and they would have these huge formations of B-17s flying together. And when they did what was called carpet bombing, so that when the lead plane would drop their bombs, all the planes would drop their bombs at the same time. Because they didn't have, nowadays you see these, on TV you see these things called smart bombs, which the two words together are kind of bizarre to use smart and bomb together. But smart bombs are that they're guided by laser, and so you light up an area with a laser, and the bomb then goes to that area. They didn't have smart bombs back then. All they had were big, heavy things that when they hit the ground, they blew up. That was it. And so the only way is that rain? Wow. First I thought it was a plane, but the plane just hovered above us there for a minute. Oh, I miss Nashville. Nashville's 80 degrees and sunny. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have said that, should I? I've mowed my yard 4 times already. Anyway, what good does that do me? I'm here. But the planes would then all the bonds would go down together. I remember as a little kid asking my dad if he ever killed anybody. Now, I don't know if you can answer. Have you ever answered someone really with an attitude and not use words? Hey, Chris, what do you think about going out bar hopping tonight? Okay. Now that's a like, you're an idiot, right? So that's kind of that response. I remember asking my dad if he'd ever killed anyone. He just looked down. And I said, then I probably shouldn't ask you again. He looked at me, and then he just said, I'll say this once. I don't know how many people I am responsible for their death. And that was it. He never wanted to talk about that again. Now, you're 19 years old, you're flying B-17s, you're dropping bombs on people, and at 19, 20 years old, you're killing who knows how many people. And who knows who they are. It's just your job is to take out, your job is just to press that button, actually. Your job is to press that button when they tell you to press it. But they don't give you any kind of understanding of what's going on. Someone's evil, and we're going to destroy what they have, so I press a button when someone tells me. And I don't know what that did to him. And he went mission after mission. He's on his 13th mission. By this time, he's doing radar on the plane. He's no longer the bombardier. He's doing radar. And he said, for this one, they began to go across France, and they were going over into the German side on their way to Berlin, because it's now January of 1945, something like that, and their role now was to go towards Berlin to, as they say, soften the ground for the ground troops, so that on their way to Berlin. And so that was my dad's role, and his 13th mission. He's crossing the French-German border, and planes just began to explode all around him. He said, we're there, and it's actually, he said, the air was peaceful. Usually those things are just, he goes, it was just eerily peaceful, and then suddenly all hell broke loose. And he said, planes are exploding next to him. He hears guys screaming, as loud as a plane is, he hears them screaming as they fall out of other planes. And he's watching men fall to the ground, dead before they're not parachuting because they're already dead. And he's watching planes explode, and fire and flak is coming all over, all this metal, and the bombs are exploding around him. And suddenly his plane is hit. And his plane is hit again, and he realizes his plane is going to go down. So the pilot said, abandon ship, and which is actually what they say, even though it's an airplane, abandoned ship. And he went back to get the tail gunner. I don't know if you know the old planes. At the bottom of a plane would be this turret, where a guy, you ever see Star Wars? You see that little turret? That's exactly what it was like. He was at the bottom of a plane in this little turret, which was this hard plastic kind of a thing that had just come out and they used in the war. And so he's down there, the turret gunner, or the tail gunner. And so he was my dad's closest friend at the time of the war. And he goes back to get him to help him out, because the turret gunner always needed help getting out. And the turret gunner, my dad reaches in and he looks, and the turret gunner is decapitated. So my dad turned around and walked back, and the port gunner, the guy on the left side of the plane, is unconscious. Now, fortunately, he does have his parachute on, so my dad takes him over to the door on the left side, holds on to the ripcord, and just pushes the guy out of the plane. The parachute opens up, and he goes down. The guy actually lived, which is just amazing. Matter of fact, he came over to my dad's house a couple times, and he'd always come up to me and he'd go, "Your daddy saved my life." But he'd always do this, "Your daddy saved my life." And he just pinched my cheek. And I remember I was about 16 years old. He goes, "Your daddy." And I said, "Yeah, can do without the pinch. I'm 16. He just, I know he saved your life." But here, the thing that got me was that how appreciative he was to be saved. And every day he lived with the fact that my dad didn't have to do that. He didn't have to check if he was alive or dead. My dad stopped and checked, which the plane could have exploded, because engines were burning and it was ready to explode. And he goes, "Your daddy could have left me at any time, but he didn't leave me. He made sure I was alive. He held the ripcord. He opened the door. He pushed me out. He said, 'Your daddy saved my life.'" And boy, that kind of appreciation, I remember getting saved shortly after that, going back. That's the kind of heart I want to have. I want to remember that you saved my life. I don't ever want to lose that, because you could have left me right there, and I could have exploded in my sin. But you didn't leave me to do that. You got me, and you checked, and you made sure I was alive, and you saved me. And it's like, oh, God, I don't ever want to lose that appreciation. So my dad finally, he and the pilot look at each other, and just before The pilot needs to make sure that my dad goes first because my dad was in charge of the back half of the plane. The pilot's in charge of the front. So everyone's gone except my father and the pilot. My father turns to look towards the pilot and then kind of turns back a little bit because he said he heard something. And as he turned back, this piece of shrapnel went by and pulled off his oxygen mask and the little leather attachment to it and stuck it to the side of the plane. My dad said, had I not turned back quickly, it would have gone through my brain. And I said, I knew that on the plane, and I remember going, oh, God, thank you. So my dad grew up Catholic. He was a very religious man. He believed in God. He went to church every week. And so there was this beautiful awareness that he knew now that God saved him. So he does thumbs up with the pilot, jumps out of the plane, and 3 seconds later, the plane just explodes. My dad did not know if the pilot got out, didn't know. The pilot ended up getting captured, went to this prison camp, and my dad didn't know for 20 years whether the pilot lived until the pilot from another side of the country, something came up with a way of communicating, saw David J. DuPre written somewhere, contacted him and said, are you the same David J. DuPre that did B-17 and we were bombed on our 13th mission? I'm the pilot. And 20 years later, they had a reunion, which was just, I wish I could have been there. It was like 1965 or 66, whatever, and they had a reunion. And I just remember my dad talking about this reunion he had with the pilot. It was just an incredible time. And so he jumps out of the plane. The plane explodes 3 seconds later. He said the heat, it was a ball of fire, and heat just came at him. The fire didn't get him, but this heat did. And he said it was like he got punched, and he just rolled over and rolled over. And now he's dropping like a rock towards the earth. And he knew he had to pull the ripcord at 1,500 feet because that's what they were trained. Every time the plane went up or the plane came down, whenever they got to 1,500 feet, the pilot would yell out 15 or 1,500 or take a look, boys, which just meant when you get to this height, you pull the ripcord. And because you don't do it at 5 miles up, you don't do it at 10,000 feet and go, because you'll be dead. But you don't do it at 150 feet. That's not good either. Sorry. 1,500 feet. And that allows you to land safely but quickly. Now, if it was just going to be a recreational one, you'd do it maybe at 2,500 or 3,500 feet. But to save your life, you get down as low as you can and then pull it. Unfortunately, you're going to land at about 30 miles an hour. This is a 1940s parachute, not like the kind when you see nowadays people parachute and they land and they go. And I said, okay, how was your first parachute ride? Oh, it was very good. The hardest part was jumping out of the plane, but I knew I was attached to my instructor, and then we landed. I mean, that's really how they land, isn't it? Or they land and they go, you get that little scuttle with the feet. But back then they went 30 miles an hour, you land. And you hope that you land, and they taught you how to jump. You would jump off of a 10-foot jump inside when they would teach you how to parachute, and then you would land and roll over. A lot of guys broke their ankles jumping for the preparation. So it was just amazing. So you land and then you just roll. So my dad is thinking, okay, I'm going to land, I'm going to roll. And he gets down to 1,500 feet, and he pulls the ripcord. And he said, I learned a very, very valuable lesson that day, one that I kept with me the rest of my life. Never, ever, under any circumstances, should you put your parachute on upside down. Because the second he pulled the ripcord, his legs went, doom. And now he's like this, and his legs are up here. The problem was it flipped him so quickly that the muscle from his back went and separated. Now, has anybody ever pulled a little muscle in your shoulder, and you got to go get something on a shelf, and it's kind of like, gosh, that hurts. And you're going like, well, imagine the whole part of your back, and you're upside down, going down. You're going to hit the ground at 30 miles an hour, but your head's going to hit first. So back then, you see, parachutes there were 4 holes, 2 up above and 2 down below. What you did was you put your legs and your arms through them, and then you just tightened them back there. And it's so easy to flip that over in the midst of a battle. And so my dad would have that thing, and he would go in, and it's going all over the plane. The guy's head's cut off, and pushes this guy out, and he puts his arms and legs through and tightens it up. And, oh, man, I thought I pulled down on it to tighten it, and I guess I pull up. So he pulls up, and it's upside down. And now he's falling head first, and he finally is able to take the strings. He said he walked himself up until his head was up. And now his feet are down. He can barely move his right arm at all. He's just holding like this. So he's trying to steer with his left arm, which really hurts because his muscles pulled away. And he's pulling away and going, okay, I got to steer to something. And there's railroad tracks and there's water. And he finally sees a field, and he pulls over, and he gets close to the field. And he goes, oh, no. The field is a field of corn that's been cut. And it's thousands of little corn stalks sticking up in the air like swords. And he goes, I can't go there. And he sees this area over here where there's no corn, so he pulls over to the area. And he gets over to the area, and now he's going to land on this area no matter what, because he can't pull away from it. And he gets close enough, and he looks, and he goes, oh, the reason why no corn is grown here is because corn doesn't grow on a boulder. And so he's now going to land on the boulder at 30 miles an hour. And he tries to pull away with everything he can, hits the boulder with his right leg, and his right leg then, what it does an accordion break. It breaks in 9 places. So the muscles pull off his back, your best buddy's been decapitated, your plane's exploded, you're in German soil, and your leg is broken in 9 places. And you're 20 years old? And so he pulls himself, actually, yeah, he's just 20, pulls himself over to a hedgerow, takes out his pistol, and then falls unconscious. This little girl comes over. He doesn't know how much later. She's shaking him. He opens his eyes. She goes, Sprechen Sie Deutsch? He goes, no. She goes, Parlez-vous français? He goes, no. Well, do you speak English? He goes, yes. Oh, okay. I'll be back with my father. So she goes away. My name is Hugo Montoya. So she comes back with her father, and he's kind of scared, and yeah, her father would be dead because he killed him. So I got that. So he comes back, and his father was a part of the French underground. And they scooted across the border, got my dad, came back into occupied France, and realized how bad my father was. The muscle on his back was horrible, but the break, they tried to set it as best they could, but they had no medication because the Germans had taken all the medication. So he said, Mr. DuPre, we are really sorry, but we have nothing that we can do except cut your leg off or give you to the Germans. And hopefully they'll give you medication. But we have none, so the only option you're going to have is if gangrene will set in a day or two, and we will have to cut your leg off. So what do you want us to do? He said, give me to the Germans. My dad's hope was that because he was an officer, they would treat him well. He gave him to the Germans. They set his leg. They gave him medication. And he didn't get gangrene. They didn't have to cut his leg off. And they helped him for a couple of weeks to get set and to get healed up, and then they shipped him off to a prison camp. So basically his time in the remainder of the war was inside a Nazi prison camp with many of the older soldiers now gone, and because they were running out of soldiers. And they were starting to hire, or starting to put 12 to 18-year-olds in as guards. So he had a number of teenage guards who were, by that time, so hated the Americans for this or that. The older German officers and older German soldiers, my dad said, were kind. It was the younger ones that were angry, and they wanted to turn the country around, and they hated Americans. My dad said the rest of the war, he was abused and beaten and rifle butted, and he said, I won't even go into it all, but he spent the last 3 months of the war as a POW not receiving great care. And I say that loosely and lightly, not receiving great care, because he started to talk about it and then he couldn't. He got choked up and then he could never go into detail. He told me a few things that I won't go into, but he never went into detail of what happened. And you're looking at, and you're going, oh my gosh, it's a 20-year-old. How many 20-year-olds here? Anybody 20? That's you. I mean, that's you. and my dad came out of the war. He wasn't Nice Guy Dave anymore. There were two Daves. One was Nice Guy Dave. The other was Mr. Hyde. If you know the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is this brilliant scientist, and Dr. Jekyll is a monster that he helps create within himself. And the war created this monster for my dad. So he comes back. Everyone in Rochester, I'm from Rochester, New York, everyone in Rochester thinks my dad, he was missing in action, MIA, never heard from for months, and it was assumed that he was killed because all these other people on his plane had died. Not everybody, but most of them had died, and so it was assumed that he had died also. So when he came home a war hero. And everything was, wow, Dave DuPre is home, and this is awesome. And there's pictures of him with his right leg in the cast, and either with crutches or with a cane. And handsome man, very very popular, very very kind man. What he was known for, but now hidden within him is this whole different person. And my mother knew the first guy. Still didn't want to marry him because she wasn't in love with him. But when he came home from the war, this handsome GI, everyone said, Mary Kay, look at him. You'd be a fool. My dad was so in love with my mom. He wanted to marry her. And my mother said, she literally told me, she said, because of the peer pressure, my mother loved him. And I didn't have, there was one other suitor I had that I was in love with that he wasn't, he said, she's too good for me. And my mother's going, no, I love you like you are. You're a wonderful man. But because he felt so low of himself, he would not extend his heart to my mom. And so my mom married my dad because she said, I got to have somebody. Now, the somebody was a very well-known, very loved, kind man. But hidden inside him now was a different person. Outside the house, he was Nice Guy Dave. My dad was a teacher. He was teacher of the year after year. Finally, he was teacher of the year in Rochester so many times, not just for his school, but he was teacher of the year in the whole district. They voted him. And in the school, they finally made it mandatory that you could only be teacher of the year once every 7 years. Because otherwise, Dave DuPre would be teacher of the year. They voted him like 3 times in a row, and the other teacher said, what about us? And the student said, as long as we keep having Mr. DuPre, he's going to be teacher of the year. That's just the way it's going to be. And so they said, okay, no longer every 7 years. So every 7 years, my father was teacher of the year. Whenever it was legal for him to be teacher. And he was outside the home, just congenial and loving and telling stories, and the kids loved him, and everybody knew that Dave DuPre. What I would get coming home would be a very different Dave DuPre, because what had happened in the war, which I didn't know, was that when you're cooped up, my dad said, years later, he said, when they close the door, you don't know if you're in that jail cell for a day, a month, a year, or 10 years. All you know is it's closed and it's locked and you can't get out. And he says, and that's when the demons came in. Now, when you say it lightly like that, but we know there's actually demonic forces. And the work that it did, the post-traumatic stress that men go through and women go through after those kinds of things, we don't really fully understand. We didn't talk about post-traumatic stress syndrome until after Vietnam. So no one talked about it. So all these men from World War II come back from the war, no one talked about it. All they were told was that put it behind you and live your life. Well, you know how many people in my age grew up with violent dads? A lot of us. And to me, a father was the person that hit me when he wanted to. He'd just go by me from behind and hit the back of my head because he was frustrated. Or he'd take his belt off, or he'd kick me, or I'd get thrown against a wall. I mean, it was like that man, his job is to provide money so that we can live and to hurt me. That's what a father did. And so I looked around at all the other dads that I knew. And my best friend Tom had a great dad. And all the other dads that I knew were either alcoholics, violent, or cheated on their wives, or all three. So I'm looking around going, wow, dads are just not good people. This is just what they do. They hurt you. And I remember one time I was just a little guy. And I could tell by the way the car door closed. I don't know if you can follow me here, but I could tell by how the car door closed if I was going to get it. And I wanted my mom to always be home, and sometimes she'd be out shopping, and I'd be home, and Dad would come home, and the car door would slam. It was like, oh. I remember one time my mom looking at me, and she goes, what's wrong? Car door slammed, what's wrong? And she looked down, and I'd literally peed my pants because I was that scared of how the car door slammed. This little 5, 6, 7-year-old just so scared of what the night had in store for it. My mother never saw any of it. It was always when she was in another room, I'd get smacked or slapped, or one time when he took a belt off and brought me upstairs, she had come in and heard me wailing away and kind of yelled up, and things stopped. But otherwise, it was always out there. It's always going on around, but I'm aware of it, but not really aware of it. You know what I'm saying? So I didn't blame my mom for any of it because she just wasn't around at those moments. And finally, she's walking in the kitchen with shopping or something, and I'm flailing across the room, and she sees, and that's it, no more. And the three of us, there's an older brother and an older sister. The older sister, she got a little bit of it, but being a girl, she didn't get the full extent. My oldest brother, who's a year older than I am, he was born very sick, and he spent the first few years back and forth from the hospital and the home with a blood disorder. And because of that, he did not get any, basically, he was weak, and he was looked at as weak, and my father detached himself from my brother. But then I came along as a strong, healthy boy, and then I got it. I remember moving away, and we moved away an hour from where we were to a little tiny house in a little tiny town. And it was, I remember walking in this house after my first day of school. I walked in, and the house, excuse me, was filled. It was just warm, and it smelled great. I remember walked in the house, and my mother was in the kitchen, and she just put her arms out like this. She said, "How was your first day of school?" And I realized my life was different. There was no car door that was going to slam. There was no hand that was going to hit me. There was no violence. It was, the house smells good. I am greeted by love. And I just walked into her arms, put my head down on her, and just began to cry. This little kid, she goes, "What is it?" And I just thanked her for I didn't use the terminology. I don't even know really what I said, but it was just so good to come into a house and not be hurt, and knowing that I wouldn't be hurt. Now, Dad would come around a couple times a month, court-ordered visits, those kinds of things. They were always, Sunday afternoon, I want to play with my friends. Dad's got to be here, so I'd sit here, and he'd fall asleep on the couch because we didn't ever do anything. So he'd watch either football or baseball or something like that, and have a dinner and then go home. And it was always, "Thanks for coming," that kind of thing, and "Good to see you," and, no, it's not. It's good to see you go. Thank God you're going. I can get back to my loving mother and caring household, and you're gone. The violence is gone. And so time went on, and a few years later, I'm 19 years old. I get saved. We're going to 12:15, is that correct? 12:30, okay. I'll probably end before 12:30. So we're going, and I get saved at 19. During this whole time, between then, as I was growing up, my dad would still come out. I was an athlete. I was actually kind of in New York State. I know you're hard to believe. I was kind of an elite athlete in the sense that I had scholarships to Villanova and William and Mary. I played a little bit of pro soccer for a while. I was invited with the scholarships to Villanova and William and Mary were track scholarships because they wanted to train me for the 1976 Olympics and the 1980 Olympics. So my level was high of what I did. I was very fast, I could jump very far, and I was a very good soccer player. And colleges loved that and wanted to pay me to come. And so my dad would come out to my track meets, he'd come out to my soccer games. And it was like, oh, I just felt he was there because I was always doing well and it made him feel good. And I mean, that's how he was wanting to be a good father and to show up. And I was so filled with bitterness, I didn't want him there because I thought that he was, being there because I was doing well. I mean, talk about arrogance and pride. And I had it. And that's what bitterness does. It just leads that way. So I get saved, and shortly after I'm saved, the Lord goes, so, what about your father? It wasn't so. You need to go forgive your father. It was, he put the ball in my court and said, so, what about your dad? Oh, my dad. Yeah, you saved me, so I forgive him. Just forgive my dad. Yeah, I forgive him. That's good. Somebody would bring up his name, and I'd think, evil devil man. Oh, but I forgave him. That's right. Okay, good. Isn't forgiveness funny? You know what it is when you've forgiven someone, you've actually said the words in your heart, you've knelt down, Lord, I just forgive that person. Yes, I forgive them. And then someone mentions their name, and inside you go, ugh. And you've already forgiven them, but you want to say bad things about them. So have you really forgiven them? You've said the words, but have you? That's why when Jesus said, how often do we forgive? 7 times? You go, 7 times? No, 7 times 70. In a day, you want us to forgive 7 times 70? He goes, yeah, I want to give you permission to keep saying, I forgive you until you don't feel the hurt anymore. So forgiveness isn't a one-time thing. It is on God's economy because God is perfect in his forgiveness. He's perfect love, casts out all fear, casts out perfect love, perfect forgiveness is great. We're in the process. Until that which is the perfect has come, I'm in a process. So sometimes I can forgive once and release it, and God, yeah. Other times there are people I forgive, and then I see them and go, oh, I know I can't kill them. And you realize, ooh, I think there's a little bitterness in there because I want them dead. There might be a remnant of hatred because I want death and destruction to them and their family. Except their dog. They've got a cute dog. Isn't it funny? But that's the reality of it, isn't it? Until that thing goes away. And I didn't know that. So I'd done the forgiveness thing. And life went on. I moved away. Found this gorgeous girl. We got married. We started having kids. We have 1 daughter. And then suddenly the Lord says, I'm away, and it really directs me to move back to the Rochester area. So I moved back to the Rochester area, and it's 1981, and I've got this polite relationship now with my dad. Is that the year you were born? Is that, yeah. They're smiling, 1981. Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for going there. Yeah, and that's the year, what did I say? No. So it's 1981, and it's towards the end of the year. Now, I've been there and seen my dad a few times, and it's been fine, and it's been polite, But I still hurt. Somebody would say his name. Was like, And the Lord says to me, it's now 1982. I've been there a year. He says, you've been there a year. So, what about your dad? I said, what about my dad? I've forgiven my dad. I act polite around him. I just kind of hear this, Okay. You know when someone says okay like that? You just want to slap them. Now, it's God, so I'm not going to slap them, but it's kind of like, oh, what do you mean okay? You mean it's not okay. That's what you mean, isn't it? What? And then I really knew what the Lord wanted me to do was to go to my father and face to face forgive him. I said, is that what you want me to do? And I just knew, yes. I said, Lord, I don't think you fully understand. And it's like, it's time began the journey of saying to God he didn't understand. He says, excuse me? I think I fully understand. He says, okay, I'll do it. So I wrote out this thing, and it was very, very eloquent. I mean, I was like, Dad, I was going to have him sit down in the house, just the two of us in a separate little room with my family out there for protection in case he went violent. Okay? If he went postal, I wanted to be close to the door and have the door not open, but opened enough so that I didn't have to turn a handle. I'm totally serious. Because when I was around my dad, I always knew where my dad's hands were because they always hurt me. And when I got older, I remember sitting down at a couch and my dad putting an arm up like this to rest it, and I went like this because I knew his hand was coming. So I was always aware of my dad's hands, even as an adult. Now, he was 5'8", and I grew up to be, I was 6'2", and I'm back down to 6'1.5". But I keep shrinking. I just saw someone I hadn't seen in years, and I looked at him, and I used to be taller than he was, and now he's a good inch shorter than I was. He looked at me and goes, I know, I'm shrinking. That's one of the first things he said. It's Dick O'Reilly, he's shrinking. I get this thing all written out. Dad, you need to know what you did to me. This is how I felt as a child. When you hit me, when you hurt me, when you yelled, when you kicked me, this is how I felt as a child. I'm telling you all of this so you know all of this, of how it affected me, that I just want to say, because of who Jesus is, I forgive you, and I just want you to know that. So I had this really eloquent Jesus thing, making Jesus look good, very religious sounding thing. I get to the house with my wife. We just had our second child. This is July of 1982. In April, our second child, Katie, was born. So we've got this little one that's just a couple months old. We get to my dad's house, and he's out in the back standing by his garden. He had this big garden that was kind of like from that post to that wall, and it went over to that wall and came back. And so it was this big garden filled with stuff, and he was just standing admiring it. There's all these people on the deck. They're cooking hot dogs and hamburgers, and I walk in. My dad's remarried. This is years later. I say hi to his wife, Marion. We greet each other, and I get out to the back, and there's my dad, and the Lord says, now. I said, no, not now. I have this thing, and I want to read it to him in a safe room. Out here, he could go postal with everybody watching. This would not be good. Oh, this would be really bad. The family, he could turn around and start yelling at me. He probably wouldn't hit me, but this won't be good. Now, oh Lord, please no. Please let this just be the imagination that I'm having of thinking that God's speaking to me. That's what it is. I'm imagining God speaking to me, and this thing inside goes, now. Okay. So I go out, and my dad's standing there. I'm kind of standing behind him, just a foot behind him, just like, oh, I don't want to do this. So I get up the nerve, and I step up here like this. I go, hi, Dad. He goes, oh, Chris, good to see you. Happy July 4th. Happy July 4th, Dad. He was big July 4th, America, flag waving, all, And so this is a big day for him. It was good that I was there and trying to be respectful. And I go, okay, the list. It's in the car. No, I don't have it memorized. Have you ever been in front of someone that was intimidating, and they did something to hurt you, and other people even saw it, and you go back at night and you're lying in bed, and you're thinking, oh, I should have said this. I could have said this. And you come up in that moment with the perfect thing you want to say to them. And you can't wait to see them again because you've got it all down. This, you don't ever talk to me that way. Not only that, this thing was wrong that you said. Not just that, I don't have to. And you just go through the list of stuff, and you are Mr. Confident, and you're lying in bed. It's like, oh yeah. And then you see that person the next time, and you go up to them and say, hey. They turn around, and you see that face, you go, you bloody boo. You? What are you talking about? Get it out, idiot. Yeah, and suddenly, never mind. And then you just go away going, what happened? Have you ever had that experience? So I'm standing there next to my dad. I go, okay, think about this. And I go, okay, the sheet of paper. So I brought this literally in my mind. Ooh, good thing you were there. I brought the sheet of paper in front of my eyes. I brought the sheet of paper in front of my eyes, and I looked at it, and it said Dad, and the rest of it just suddenly went and went blank. I'm going, no, I need something to come off the paper. And I'm looking, and it just said Dad. I'm standing next to him, and God says, now. And I'm thinking, I don't have it yet. The words aren't back yet. Now. I go. So he goes, now, check out the garden this year. I put this stuff in, and I put this, and he's talking for a couple of minutes, and my brain, I'm trying to think, and there's nothing. There's nothing. I hit, trash to pull up the trash. Anything that's in there, the computer's blank. There's nothing. I've got no emails coming in. I'm thinking, oh, God, help me. And suddenly, I just said, Dad, I just knew I had to talk. I said, Dad, I got to tell you something. He goes, oh, okay, what is it? You know all that happened between us when I was a little boy? And that's all I could say. And then I clammed up, my heart's beating 1,000 beats a minute, and he doesn't say anything. And finally he goes, yeah. Not yes, or just, yeah. I was like, oh, this is so hard. I said, Dad, I just want to tell you, and I've got nothing else to say but two things, that I love you and I forgive you for anything that happened. That's all I can say. Nothing eloquent. This is how you hurt me. This is how it affected me. This is what it did to me when I was 13. This is what it did to me when I was 15. When I was 8, this was the effect. I used to pee myself. I didn't go through any of that. Dad, I love you, and I forgive you for everything. Nothing more on the paper. That's it. That's all that God wrote on it. That's all. And I get it out there, and my dad says nothing. No. It's just out there like a booger. Sitting out there, That's what I felt like. It's like, something, yell, hit, just something. This is worse. I thought the worst thing would be yelling, or he'd give me a slap side of the face. This was the worst. Nothing. And I'm going, oh gosh, I just put myself out there. And the Lord says, put your arm around your father. Excuse me. Now, this right here, I just did this. I went out the paper. And thank you very much for giving me a blank piece of paper. I appreciated that. I looked down for help. You weren't there. Now you want me to put my arm around him when he's not receiving what I said. This is put your arm around your father. So I put my arm around him, thinking that he's just going to slough it off. The second my hand hit his shoulder, he bent down like this and began to weep. And he just and he's going like this. And I'm holding him like this. I'm going, oh no. And he puts his left arm around me. The second his left arm hit my waist over here, I began to weep. And about 10, 20 seconds into it, I'm thinking, what's my family thinking at the moment? Because the two of us are just looking really weird right now. I won't give you the backside version, but let me tell you, I'm sure it wasn't pretty. And we're just crying and crying. And whatever was going on in my dad, I knew was good. And I knew that I was being, there was a restoration going. I didn't know, nothing was said. And he's just weeping, and I'm holding him up, and he's kind of holding me up, and we're just weeping together. And finally, after 2 or 3 minutes of this, and I'm wondering, no one says a word over there. Matter of fact, no one said anything to us the entire day about it. And we get to the end of our crying, and it wasn't when sometimes women cry, and you see the little tissue goes up like this. This wasn't one of those where you need a little tissue, because that little tissue would not hold the amount of tears and snot that had just fallen from two grown men. I mean, we're just covered. And I'm watching it fall on the ground here, and I just know my face is covered. I know his face is covered. So I think, okay, now I got to help my dad get out of this thing because we don't have tissues in their pocket. You know, we weren't prepared for a big cry. And so I reach up like this, and I go, Dad, look at the corn over there. And he sees it all fly away, and he starts laughing. He goes, yeah, how about the tomatoes? And so we went, and the carrots are great. Did you see my lettuce? And we started flying this stuff all over and cleaned ourselves up. By this time, we're laughing hysterically. So when we turn around, we're laughing. And so they must have all thought we were just laughing the entire time and couldn't tell that we were crying. At least that's what I think, because no one said anything. So we're standing there like this, and we're just laughing. And finally, our hands are back to our sides. And I looked at him, and he looked at me. And I put my arm up, and he put his arm around, and we held each other one more time, and that was it. We never talked about that moment again. Never said a word. It came time for me to go that day, and whatever used to make me shake his hand, I didn't even think about it. I was back in church, and there was a guy in front of me. I'm saying goodbye. So what do? I give him a hug. So I just reached over, and I gave my dad a hug goodbye. And he goes, whoa. Oh, Dad, we hugged earlier. I'm sorry. He goes, no. I want to do that every time. I said, really? He goes, oh, yeah. He goes, come here. One more. Give me another. So I gave him a big hug. And then every time I would come to the house, he'd open the door and go, ah. So I'd come into his arms. He'd come into my arms. We'd give each other a big hug. And that went on year after year. And then I went away to a Catholic charismatic community. They asked if I would come and do an extensive number of weeks on God's heart and on worship, and would also do worship for a conference they were doing for a week. I said, sure. So it's going to be a few weeks together. One thing I didn't realize is they have a little bit different culture than I had with my little Christian community, which was, let me see. Okay. Do you mind coming up? Your first name again? Kevin. Okay. Come on up over here. Yes, it'll make it. Now, in my Christian community, you're going to be a girl for just a second, and then you'll be a guy. So I had to think. So that was a little too good. we were told how to hug. See, we don't hug this way, okay? You do the old. That's why God gave you a hip. You do the side hug, and you put your hip out a little bit. It's all for protection. You know, it's kind of like, oh gosh, okay. So I grew up hugging like this. You know, it's just I felt like I was hugging my grandmother all the time, but it was fine. It was okay. So I get to this Catholic charismatic community, and now you're me, okay? Now, what I want you to do is when you greet me, just kind of look over there, okay? Just trust me, you'll be glad you did. So I go to, and this guy comes up, hi, I'm Brian, good to meet you. Aren't you glad you turned left and not right? Yeah, okay. You can sit down. Yes, excellent. So this guy goes, hi, I'm Brian, and gives me a kiss on the cheek. And I went, whoa. He goes, oh, sorry. That's how we greet everybody around here. I said, really? Because I think I'm going to be here for 3 weeks. It's going to be a long time. He goes, now we take Romans 16:16 very seriously. Greet one another with a holy kiss. And I said, well, I know Romans 16:16. I know that verse very well. I thought it was just kind of cultural to the day. He goes, it's cultural to those that will understand its meaning, because of what it means is when I kiss you, I've invited you into my world as my guest, and I'm here to serve you. I said, I like that. That's what the kiss meant. That's what the New Testament kiss was about. I invite you into my world, and I will serve you as my guest. And it's my pleasure and my honor to take care of all your needs. I go, I like this kiss thing. Except I don't like it from Brian, but So I go through the day, and all these people, guys and gals, are kissing me. And it's like the next day I get up and I come down and think maybe they'll stop because now they know me. And I get to breakfast, and the next morning, and there they are. Hey, good to see you. And he's already leaning. So it's like, oh, gosh, okay. So I make it obvious, go after the cheek, don't get anything else. And I'm doing this kiss thing on the cheek. Well, after a while, it got to be fairly familiar. So a few days into it, I reach down and give somebody a kiss. And, after a couple of days later, I finally gave Brian a kiss on the cheek. Hey, how you doing? He goes, wow, you've come a long way. I goes, well, I'm learning, I'm trying. Well, by week 2, week 3, man, I'm kissing dogs, trees, bats that are flying at night. It didn't matter. If it was moving, I was kissing it. If it wasn't moving, I was kissing it so it wouldn't move. I mean, it was just amazing. So it's like, so I get home, and I drive home from Albany, and I had the phone call before. I said, hey, on your way back to your place, would you stop and have dinner with us at our house? Sure, Dad, no problem. So I'm driving home, get in, walk, doors opened up, my dad's arms are there. Well, I've been kissing for weeks now, and it means nothing to me anymore. And I walk over to him, and I go, hey, Dad, give him a big hug. The next thing I know, big kiss on the cheek. And he just takes my arms and his arms and extends them and looks at me like this. He goes, whoa, what was that? He goes, oh, Dad, I'm so sorry. I've just been at this Catholic charismatic community, and they kiss each other all the time. And sorry. He goes, I think I like that. He says, kiss me again. So I come over and kisses me. He goes, here. Gives me a kiss. He goes, I like this. Let's do this. I said, okay, let's do this. A couple weeks later, I come in, and he kisses me again. I kiss him. And as he's kissing me, he goes, hey, I prayed that prayer at the end of that 007 show. I said, you prayed the prayer at the end of the number. He goes, at the end of the number show, this 007? I'm thinking, what? He goes, and I went, 700 Club? He goes, yeah, that's it. I said, you prayed that prayer? He goes, yeah. I said, Dad. So we gave each other a big hug, and it was just so awesome. So we're holding each other, and time goes on, and I'm coming over again with my family, and he would always come out, and as I coming, I see the drapes in front of his window are held back like this as I'm coming down the street, and I say to Laura, my wife, I goes, look at that, the drapes are, Dad's watching us come down the street, that's weird, and the drapes close, and we pull in the driveway, and by the time I turn the key off, my dad is opening the door, pulling me out so he can hug me and kiss me. He didn't want to wait for me to get into the house. And then he goes, okay, you can go in. I need to hug and love on your family. So he goes, and by this time I've got 3 girls, and he's hugging them and kissing them and out there. And I walked in the house, and I said to Marion, I said, was Dad holding waiting 5 minutes or something? Couldn't wait to see us or something? What was going on? And she said, he's been there for over 45 minutes. And finally I said, Dave, what are you doing? And he said, I can't wait to kiss my son. So shortly thereafter, he comes to me and says, the doctors found something on an x-ray. I'd been working in a hospital for a number of years. He brought the x-ray home because he wanted to show me. And so I put it up to the light, and I said, wow, I've never seen one like this. And they said the same thing. This is whole chest, and it was just covered in gray, like a cloud. There wasn't one area, whatever. I said, what does this mean? Because they don't know. They have no clue. Because I don't have any symptoms of anything. I just had a little bit of a tightness in my chest, but not much. It just made my arms hurt when I was gardening, and otherwise, everything's fine. I feel fine. I'm not weak. I feel strong as can be, and the Lord told me at that moment, said, go with him to the doctor every time. So we went, I sat, and I asked the doctor questions. He said, I don't have a clue what this is. I could say, maybe you've got cancer here, but not, the whole thing is gray. So that's, it's not like you've got lung cancer or, cancer here in the liver. Everything from here to here was gray. So he goes, I don't know what this is. It's the most bizarre thing. So they did these tests on him under local anesthesia. So he's awake, getting the pin pricks, and they're putting these trocars, which are these long, thin things, and they poke him in to try to get to the lung to then pull out a specimen of lung. so they can find out. So they do this twice. They have them come in, go through outpatient surgery, they give them pinpricks, and they go in and they cut in and they try to get in there and they can't do it under local, and it's horrible. It's a horrible experience. I am sitting by my father's head during the whole time, just holding his head and praying for him. And we're, got our hands are gripped together, and he's gripping my hand, and he was as strong as an ox. And he was just killing my hand, but I didn't want to say stop, so I just kind of let my hand go and said, okay, I'll get it back later in an hour or two. And so we go home after those two, and they said, Mr. DuPre, we're so sorry, we could not get a specimen. You have to come and have a lung biopsy, which is a 1-hour quick, but you're under general anesthesia. So I drove him to the hospital that morning, He had already been in. His wife drove him. And I come up to his room, and it's early in the morning, and he's sitting there, and he's sitting there without a shirt on, and he's got all these red blotches all over his chest. I go, what's that? Because I don't know. I've had these for the last few days. It's really weird. Doctor doesn't know either. So I said, well, I don't know. And so they call up and say, okay, bring Mr. DuPre down. So usually they have somebody else do that, but I'd worked there, so I said, I'll bring him down, no problem. So I put him in the stretcher and bring him down to surgery, and he's lying here like this in surgery and ready to go in what's called the holding room. His feet are there and his head is there, and he's in the stretcher. Now, whenever you see a hospital scene on a TV show or a movie, they always put the handles, the side rails down, so you can see the patient better and the camera can see. But in reality, the side rails are never, ever down. The last thing you want is a patient in a hospital to fall off a stretcher. Talk about a lawsuit. So the guardrails are up, the side rails are up, and they're metal, and they're that thin. They're really thin, stainless steel. And so they flip up, and they're there. And the doctor comes out, and with the anesthesiologist, with a resident and a third-year medical student, and they're all there lined up, all the pros. And I'd worked with one of the doctors before. He was a thoracic surgeon. I'd worked with him, Dr. Kirchner. And he said, oh, good, Chris, good to see you. We went back and forth, bantered a little bit, and said, my dad's going, so this is going to be okay? And I said, it's 1 hour skin to skin. And Dr. Kirchner goes, man, you got the lingo down. We've done this before. And you're right, Mr. DuPre, this is going to be 1 hour. It's a simple operation. And but you need to say goodbye to your wife and your son. So my dad turns to Marion. She leans over and kisses him. I love you, Dave. Bye. And I lean in, and I've decided that I'm in front of all these professionals, so I'm going to not be the kissy guy that I am, because I don't want to embarrass my dad. The fact is, I didn't want to embarrass me. So I decided to do the manly handshake. Do you know what the manly handshake is? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I reach in, I go, hey, like this. I slap his hand, I go, love you, in a manly way. I was such an idiot. Here I have this wonderful huggy, kissy relationship, and I go, love you, Dad. I go, arr. Get one of those kind of voices on there. And he looks at me, and he goes, what's that? I said, what? He goes, that's not what we do. And I'm thinking, oh, no. I know what we do. And he doesn't let me put the side rail down, which I easily could have done. He just pulls me into the stretcher, over the side rail, which cuts right into my gut, and I've got one foot like this, dangling like that, hanging on the side of the stretcher. And he starts kissing my cheeks, and he takes my head and turns me, and the doctors haven't moved. They're just standing there, just going like, and they look at me, and he goes, that's my son. I love him. He's great. And I'm thinking, oh, this is so cool. Oh, this would be a good time for God just to take me. I said, no, wait, I got wife and kids. Never mind. Okay. It was like, oh, I was just bathing in that. So I went down and went back down, and Dad goes, that's not enough. And he pulls me in the stretcher one more time, and he looks at me, and he takes both hands on either side of my cheeks. Now, when he's got me like this, he's going to turn me this way. Now he's got me like this, covering my cheeks. There's not much left except the middle part of my face. Lying in the middle part of my face are my lips. I'm thinking, oh no. And he goes, mwah. Okay, you can take me now. puts me down. And the elevator was about from here to that door away. Actually, it's a little further, probably about like this. From here to that door away, and the elevator would then take him down to the surgical suite. So my dad, they start pushing the elevator, or they start pushing the stretcher, and he gets to what is about the first row. So he goes about 15 feet, and suddenly my dad goes, "Stop, stop!" And the doctors who are now walking away just go, because they're like, what's going on next? I mean, we got ringside show for the Kiss-a-thon, and so they're watching next, and they're thinking something's wrong, and the nurse goes, "What's wrong, Mr. DuPre?" He goes, "You have to turn me around. I can't see my son when you push me this way." Oh. So they turn him around, and they start pulling him towards the door. And he goes, and I go, and I went, he goes, and he goes, and he starts shooting bullet kisses at me. And the doctors are standing there watching the whole thing, laughing, and I'm going like this. And then I loaded my gun and started shooting him, and he's in the stretcher going. The nurse is pulling him, started out laughing, is now crying. And she leaned over and she said loud enough for me to hear, "I've never seen this kind of love before." And she pulls him into the elevator. And it's not one of these that closes like this from either side. It starts on the right side and goes left. He's in the middle. So as the elevator door starts to close, he goes. And he leans over, kisses his thumb, goes, "I love you." And the door closes on his eye that's like this. And that was the last time I saw my dad alive. He died on the table. A few minutes later, had a pulmonary embolism between his heart and his lungs. And the doctor told me later, he said, "I never saw that kind of cancer before." I said, "What was it?" He said everything in his chest not only had cancer, it had already hardened and metastasized. He goes, "I don't know how your father had lived the last 6 months to a year. Everything was hard. His lungs, his heart, his stomach, his liver, just everything that was in here was brick hard. Your dad should be dead." And the one thing he told me is, he said, "If I have cancer and it's up in my chest, will I choke? That's my greatest fear is that I'll choke." And I prayed and asked God, "Please don't let me choke to death." And I had to look at your dad, and I had to say, one of the ways that people die is that they choke. They lose the ability to breathe, and they die. He goes, that's the one way. I just don't want to die that way. He said, "You need to know your dad should have died that way 6 months ago. I don't know how he lived, but he lived. And he didn't die by choking." He goes, "All I know is that God just took him." And I thought, and the pain, Marion screamed. She fell, collapsed. I had to hold her up. I started crying. And shortly after, I realized my dad left me the greatest gift a dad could leave. A loving, hugging, kissing, "I'm proud of him. Look at my son, he's great." Blow kisses, I want to convince your heart how much I love you. And that was the deposit of the last 10 years of his life, was to make up for the first 57 years, or the first however many 24 years, 25 years that I was alive. And the last 10 years was for him making up affection and love. And not a day goes by in my life that I don't see my Father's face kissing me, saying he's proud of me. Not a day goes by when I don't remember how my Father feels about me. And let me tell you something. If you want to be strengthened as a believer, you will open your heart to understand how your Father feels about you. You know the scripture, the joy of the Lord is my strength? Do you know what that means? I thought it meant this. I'm sorry, we're past our time, but I'll go 2 more minutes. The joy of the Lord, I always thought meant if I have enough joy, I'll be a strong Christian. That's not what it means. Help me. The joy of the, whose joy? What's God's joy? You. The knowledge that I'm his joy is my strength. How do I stay strong as a believer? I acknowledge that I'm God's joy. I'm the reason for this purpose, the Son of God. He went through the cross, and for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. What's the joy? Reunited with the right hand of the Father, and then having you married to him forever. You're his joy. That knowledge is my strength. And I'll tell you something, when I saw the joy and the affection of my Father's heart manifest to the, when love does not care what others think, that's real love. He wasn't looking at professionals, looking over his shoulder. He could care less what they think. All he wanted to do was, and I said that to Marion later, and I'll end with this. I said, Marion, it was hard for me during the time when my dad was kissing me because he kissed you, and then he started kissing and loving on me and saying things to the doctors. And I said, I felt awkward because he didn't do that with you. And he said, I'm sorry if that, I hope that didn't hurt you in any way. She said, no. You know, all your dad wanted you to know in the last years of his life, he so wanted you to know how much he loved you. And amen. All your dad wanted you to know was how deeply he loved you. And he said, I want to convince his heart. And I've taken that line. When my heart was convinced, I can run into my dad's arms. When my heart is convinced, I can do anything. When your heart is convinced that you're his joy and that you're his precious one, you can do anything. You can do anything. So, Papa, I just thank you. And I just pray that this little picture of a life, of this father and this transformation of a son to a father, I pray that it would penetrate into every heart that's here, everyone that's listening to this. Lord, that you would penetrate deeply into every heart. It would be more than just someone's story, but it would be the awareness of how you see us. Oh, I cannot wait to kiss you. Oh, I just want to pull you in and hold you. Oh, I want to expose your face and your heart before others and say, this is my son, this is my daughter. I love them. They're great. And that's the Papa that you are. And so I pray that the awareness of who you are, of who you really are, would be manifest. And Lord, I just ask that in the same way that you showed that in my own life, that you'd do the restoring between children and their parents here that needs to be done. And Lord, on a totally different level, that you would restore the Father's love within the homes of each one represented here and those listening. That you're the God of restoration, and you can do it. And so I pray that you would invade the hearts and the homes and turn the hearts of the fathers to the children again, and the children to their parents. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Good.